going to find the vertex, the axis of symmetry, say if it's a max-min, and find the y-intercept. You can follow along on your worksheet. I'll explain how we will provide at least 3 points very easily. To get the vertex, I'm going to say negative b over 2a, where in this case a is 1, b is 6, and c is 3. So I'm going to say negative b over 2a, a is 1, that gives me negative 3. That's the front of my vertex, and automatically in this case my axis of symmetry. So that's my axis of symmetry. To find the rest of my vertex, I'm going to fill negative 3 in either by hand or with my calculator. Because of space right now, I'm going to go to my calculator, and so I'm going to my calculator and I'm going to fill in the equation is x squared, so negative 3 in parentheses squared, plus 6x plus 6 times negative 3, and then plus 3. So my vertex is negative 3, negative 6. So here's my vertex, 1, 2, 6, negative 3, negative 6 is my vertex. It's a minimum. Since this is a positive 1, it's going up, so that would make my vertex a minimum. Here's my axis of symmetry, and now to find the y-intercept, you fill in 0 for x. And so when you fill in 0 for x in standard form, these x's just go away, 6 times 0 and 0 squared. So my y-intercept is 0, 3. Now we know this is the axis of symmetry, and so if there's a point over here, you know there's a point over here. You don't have to draw all that stuff on there, I was just laying it out for you. Okay, so now I have my 3 points that was asked for, at least 3 points. And so I've done everything, and here's my picture of my parabola. All right, now on this one, I'm going to say negative b. All right, a is 1, b is 4, and c is negative 1. So I'm going to have negative b over 2a. Negative b over 2a gives me negative 4 over 2, gives me negative 2. That's the front of my vertex and the axis of symmetry. To find the rest of the vertex, I fill this into the original by hand or with my calculator. And so I'm filling in negative 2 in parentheses for x. So I have negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 minus 1. And I get negative 5. So the rest of my vertex is negative 5. My axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. This one's going up, so this is a minimum. And now it also asks for my y-intercept. If I fill in 0 right here, I have negative 1 left. These just go to 0. So my y-intercept is 0, negative 1. My vertex is negative 2, negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And due to symmetry, if there's a point here, there's a point over here, because it's cut right in half. And so there's my answer to that. All right, now for the rest of it. All right, so on this one, we're instructed to find the y-intercept, the axis of symmetry, and the vertex. So A is 3, B is negative 9, and C is 11. To find the y-intercept, fill in 0 for x. These go away because they're zeros, and I get 11. And axis of symmetry I find after I find my vertex. I'm going to find my vertex and then my axis of symmetry. These are points. Okay, so my vertex is negative b over 2a. Okay, that ends up being 9 over 6 if I carry it over here because I'm squeezing it in. So that's 9 over 6, which is 3 over 2. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 3 halves, and the front of my vertex is 3 halves. So now I'm going to go to my calculator and fill that in using parentheses. So I have 3 times x, which is 3 halves right now, squared, minus 9 times 3 halves, plus 11. Always important to use parentheses. You get 4.25, or you can get it as a fraction, which is 17 over 4. Okay, and I actually don't remember getting this answer before when I worked this problem, so let me double check it. Negative b over 2a. Yeah, that looks right. And, okay. All right, now for number 4, I'm going to say A, B, and C. So I'm going to have negative b over 2a. B is 6, a is negative 2. That gives me negative 6 over negative 4, which gives me 3 halves. So that's my axis of symmetry and the front of my vertex. I'm going to fill it in negative 2 times 3 halves squared, 6 times 3 halves minus 5, which you could do by hand or with your calculator. So I have negative 2 times x is right now positive 3 halves. So I have negative 2 times 3 halves squared plus 6 times 3 halves minus 5. Sorry, I messed this up with my parentheses. 3 halves and then minus 5. So it should be negative 2x squared plus 6x minus 5. And you get negative 0.5, which I hope all of you know, if you go to math fraction, is negative 1/2. Or you could give me a fraction. So this is 3 halves negative 1/2. My y-intercept, you fill in 0 for x, and that zeroes these out, and you get negative 5. On this one, the only ones you're responsible for are 4 and 7. So to write it back into standard form from root form, you would say x minus negative 6, x plus 6, and x minus 2. That'll give me y equals x squared minus 2x plus 6x minus 12. So the final answer here is y equals x squared plus 4x minus 12. On this one, I'm going to have x minus 8 and x minus negative 7. Keeping in mind that these really might have a number in the front of them also, but right now we don't have enough information, so we're assuming the number's 1. All right, FOIL gives me x squared plus 7x minus 8x minus 56. So my answer is x squared minus x minus 56 for that one. All right, and they didn't ask me to find the vertex, but had they asked me to find the vertex of this, I would average my two roots. I would average negative 6 and 2, or 8 and negative 7 to find the vertex. All right, on this one, these would, you would not be responsible for these that are fractions yet, but if you wanted to, maybe they'll end up being bonus. And so they're kind of harder to put back into, let's do this one. Okay, they're kind of harder to put back into factored form. So you'd really start out if they're fractions, saying x equals negative 2/5. Multiply both sides by 5, you get 5x equals negative 2. Add 2, and that's the first one of your factors. We definitely did some of these, but not lately. Then you say x equals the other root, multiply by 7, add 1, And this is how you get your factors if they're fractions and you can't just do it in your head. Then you would multiply it out. 35x squared plus 5x plus 14x is plus 19x plus 2. And remember, you could average these if you needed to find the vertex. All right, let's see if there's anything else here. All right, now we're going to the next page, and we are going to solve by factoring and find the roots. First rule of factoring is take out what's in common. These don't have anything in common, so I'm going to factor x times x. 14, I'm going to use 7 and 2. Check my smiley faces. This is 7 and 2. I can get a 5 if it's a positive 7 and a negative 2. Then you set your factors equal to 0. And so you have x plus 7 equals 0. And x minus 2 equals 0. So here x would be negative 7, and here x would be 2. So my zeros are negative 7, 0, and 2, 0. Now to find the vertex, what's happening here in a picture form is you have roots at negative 7 and at 2, and the vertex is somewhere right in the middle of these. So I'm going to average negative 7 and 2 and divide by 2. I get negative 5/2. That's the front of my vertex. I'm going to go to my calculator and fill it in parentheses to find the back of my vertex. By the way, negative 5/2 is negative 2.5, so my vertex is somewhere down there. All right, so I'm going to put in negative 5/2 for x. So I'm going to have negative 5/2. So this is going to be x squared plus 5x, which is negative 5/2, minus 14. That gives me negative 20.25 if you want a fraction. Negative 81 over 4. I would accept either one. So it's down at negative 20 something. So it's way down there would be my vertex. Somewhere down there. But it didn't ask me to graph it. All right, so find your roots, factor, and average your x-intercepts. All right, so let's go to 11. First thing I want to do is get it equal to 0. Then I'm going to factor. After I check for anything in common, I factor the front, which is x times x. Factor the back, I'm going to try 4 and 2. That gives me a 4 and a 2, so I can get a 2 in the middle if this one's minus and this one's plus. All right, and then you set both your factors equal to 0 to find your x-intercepts or your roots. So this one gives me x equals 4 and x equals negative 2. So my x-intercepts are 4, 0 and negative 2, 0. Nobody asked me to graph it, but I'm just doing it to show you a picture. There's my x-intercepts. The vertex should be right in the middle of these. So I average them. 4 plus negative 2 over 2. That gives me 2 over 2. So the front of my vertex is 1, which makes sense in my picture. I don't know where to put it, and so I'm going to fill 1 back into the original. And so I have 1 squared minus 2 times 1 minus 8 gives me negative 9. So there's my vertex. It would look something like this. If you had to graph it, you'd mark off your units and draw your graph really well, but it didn't ask me to graph it. I was just doing that as an illustration for you. All right, number 12. I'm going to get it equal to 0 first. All right, so I'll move the 12x over and the 5. Then I'll look for anything in common. Nothing in common, so I'll draw 2 parentheses. I factor the 4. I'm right now thinking it's 2x times 2x. I'm going to factor the 5, 5, and a 1. That gives me a 10 and a 2, so I know I can get an 8. The 10 needs to be negative. This is positive. Then I set my factors equal to 0 to find my roots. 2x minus 5 equals 0. Gives me 2x equals 5. Gives me x equals 5 halves. So one of my zeros is 5 halves 0. This one is 2x plus 1 equals 0. 2x equals negative 1. Divide by 2. X is negative 1 half is my other 0. Now I'm going to find my vertex. I'm going to average these two zeros, add them together, and divide by 2. If you're doing it on your calculator, put the top in parentheses. 5 halves plus negative 1 half is 4 halves over 2. 4 halves is 2 over the 2. So my vertex is 1 comma something. I go back and I fill it into the original. So I'll write it up here, 4x squared minus 8x minus 5, and I fill in 1. So it gives me 1 squared is 1, so it gives me 4 minus 8 minus 5, which I believe gives me negative 9 again, just by happenstance. Alright, on this one, it's ready to go. Nothing in common, set equal to 0. Factors of x. Factors of 35 are 7 and 5. Plus and minus would get me that positive 2. Set your factors equal to 0. So this x-intercept is negative 7, and this x-intercept is 5. And so I have x-intercepts of negative 7, 0, and 5, 0. So if you're asked to graph this, you could get started. Negative 7, 0, and 5, 0. I'm going to average these together and divide by 2. That gives me negative 2 over 2, gives me negative 1. Which makes sense because it looks like negative 1's right in the middle of those. I'm going to fill it into the original. Negative 1 squared, 2 times negative 1, minus 35. Negative 1 squared is 1, plus negative 2, minus 35. That gives me negative 36. So if you had to graph it, I would count like by maybe 4s and write that down. Negative 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Do you have a time frame for the?
So if I count by 4s, it would be like right down here.
Well,
Really far down at negative 36. Now for the quadratic formula, omit these because these work out really funny. I haven't taught you what to do in the case if the thing under the square root is negative. So to study the quadratic formula, just study it on Delta Math.